They accused her of theft just because of her color, but what they didn't know would shock the entire house. The morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Grand Hayes estate as Aaliyah Moore quietly carried a tray of breakfast into the dining hall. The air was tense, thick with unease, as Victoria Hayes suddenly turned to her with a sharp glare. "Aaliyah, where is my diamond necklace? I know you took it." Victoria's voice echoed across the hall, drawing the attention of the entire household staff and a few lingering guests who had come for breakfast. Aaliyah froze, her heart pounding, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the accusing eyes of Victoria. She opened her mouth to explain, but the words felt heavy in her throat, the fear of false accusation pressing down on her. Jonathan Hayes, seated at the head of the table, looked up briefly, his expression unreadable, and then returned to his newspaper, clearly uninterested in the commotion. The guests whispered among themselves, their eyes darting from Aaliyah to Victoria, assuming the worst because of the color of Aaliyah's skin and her humble position. Aaliyah felt the familiar sting of humiliation, a lifetime of being judged before being heard rushing through her chest. Ethan Hayes, sitting at the far end, narrowed his eyes, sensing the injustice in the air, and quietly set down his coffee cup. He had grown up witnessing his mother's arrogance, her prejudices, and now it was spilling over into outright cruelty. He observed Aaliyah's calm yet dignified posture, the way she carried herself despite the false accusation, and felt a growing determination to uncover the truth. Victoria's accusations were loud, sharp, and unwavering, but Ethan knew appearances could be deceiving, and in that moment, he decided he would not allow prejudice and fear to dictate what was right. The tension in the room was suffocating, a mix of wealth, power, fear, and unspoken social hierarchies pressing down on Aaliyah, yet her eyes met Ethan's for a brief second, a silent plea for someone to see her truth. The household was on edge, and the story of deceit, misunderstanding, and the coming revelation had only just begun. Watch closely as the truth unfolds, and make sure to comment your thoughts and subscribe for the next chapter. Aaliyah Moore stood silently in the lavish dining hall, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, trying to remain composed as Victoria Hayes fumed, packing back and forth, her voice cutting like a whip as she demanded answers that Aaliyah could not give because she had done nothing wrong. Jonathan Hayes continued to glance up occasionally from his newspaper, disinterested yet aware of the tension, the power dynamics swirling in the air like a storm, while Ethan Hayes quietly observed every movement, every subtle expression, analyzing the situation, knowing that this accusation was unjust and fueled by his mother's prejudice, and he felt a surge of responsibility to defend the innocent. House guests whispered in hushed tones, some glancing nervously at Victoria's wrath, some judging Aaliyah based on the color of her skin and her position in the household. Their curiosity mingled with silent assumptions, yet none dared to intervene, and the staff shifted uncomfortably, caught between loyalty, fear, and conscience. Aaliyah's calm exterior belied the storm of emotions inside her, the years of subtle discrimination and silent suffering pressing down as she tried to maintain her dignity in front of people who saw her only as a maid, a servant, someone easily blamed. Ethan moved closer to Aaliyah, his expression firm, and whispered that he believed her, promising that he would find the truth, and Aaliyah's eyes flickered with cautious hope, realizing that someone in the household might finally see beyond appearances. Meanwhile, Victoria's accusations escalated, her tone sharper, almost shrill, her insistence that Aaliyah had stolen the diamond necklace growing louder with every passing second, drawing the attention of the entire staff and visitors who crowded around, the room thick with tension, whispers, and the heavy weight of judgment. Jonathan finally looked up, his eyes cold yet calculating, sensing the opportunity to assert control over the situation. But Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm yet unwavering, requesting a proper investigation, a fair process, refusing to let prejudice dictate judgment, and the room fell silent at the audacity of a young man challenging the authority of his mother and his father's empire. Grace, the household assistant, peeked nervously from the doorway, hesitant to intervene, yet secretly relieved that Ethan was taking charge, giving hope to those who knew the truth but had felt powerless for years. The diamond necklace sat gleaming in the safe, untouched, yet the shadow of suspicion hovered over Aaliyah, and Ethan knew that uncovering the hidden truth would not only clear her name, but also reveal the deeper realities of privilege, power, and racial bias that permeated their world, a lesson in justice that some were not ready to hear. He turned to Aaliyah, whispering that he would handle this carefully, and she nodded silently, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and relief, knowing that the next steps would determine her fate and the moral conscience of everyone watching. The investigation was set into motion, a delicate and tense unraveling of lies, assumptions, and hidden truths, promising revelations that would shock the household, challenge prejudices, and expose the strength of integrity in the face of falsehoods. Stay tuned for the next chapter, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to follow how justice unfolds for Aaliyah Moore. Aaliyah Moore sat quietly in the grand sitting room, her hands folded in her lap, the tension from Victoria Hayes' relentless accusations still heavy in the air, while Ethan Hayes paced nearby, his mind racing as he meticulously examined every detail of the household, every movement, every glance, knowing that the truth was hidden in plain sight, and that exposing it would take patience, courage, and cunning. For the world often judged Aaliyah not by her character, but by the color of her skin and the position she held, assumptions that had silenced her for years. Yet now she felt a cautious hope, for Ethan was determined to reveal what others refused to see. Jonathan Hayes observed from his leather armchair, his expression unreadable, weighing the consequences of his wife's accusations against the potential scandal that could tarnish his carefully curated image. And although he maintained an air of control, even he could sense that the balance of power was shifting, a subtle unease creeping into his mind as Ethan began to question the evidence, question the motives, and question the biases that had clouded everyone's judgment. Victoria's sharp eyes darted between her son and Aaliyah, her composure flickering for the first time as Ethan calmly outlined the inconsistencies in her accusations, pointing out overlooked details, subtle timing discrepancies, and the undeniable fact that the diamond necklace had never left the safe. Yet her pride and fear of losing face made her stubbornly cling to the narrative she had constructed, refusing to admit the possibility of being wrong. Aaliyah's colleagues, the house staff, and even some of the guests watched with bated breath as the confrontation unfolded, whispers passing through the room, some astonished by Ethan's fairness, some impressed by Aaliyah's quiet dignity, and a few silently regretting their previous judgments, realizing too late that appearances could be deceiving and that integrity often resided in those overlooked by society. Emily, the assistant, finally found courage, stepping forward to confirm Aaliyah's account, adding her own observations of the household routines, the handling of valuables, and the subtle patterns of attention that had gone unnoticed by those blinded by privilege. And each word she spoke strengthened Aaliyah's credibility, the atmosphere thick with tension, suspense, and the dawning awareness that justice could prevail if only truth was allowed to shine. Ethan then took the crucial step, retrieving security footage, cross-checking timestamps, and confronting Victoria with undeniable evidence, revealing that her assumptions were baseless, and Aaliyah had acted with nothing but honesty and professionalism, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath as the truth slowly unraveled, shattering long-held prejudices, forcing Jonathan to acknowledge the reality that his wife's bias had caused unnecessary humiliation, and compelling the house guests to reconsider their own snap judgments about race, class, and position. In that charged moment, Victoria's face paled, her elegant composure cracking under the weight of exposure, and she struggled to respond. But Ethan's calm insistence, Aaliyah's quiet dignity, and the corroboration of Emily made it impossible for her to continue denying reality, the room now a courtroom of morality where honesty triumphed over prejudice, and every observer learned a painful but necessary lesson about the harm of assumptions. Aaliyah exhaled softly, a wave of relief mingling with pride, for years of silent endurance had culminated in this vindication, and Ethan gently assured her that the final chapter would bring full recognition, respect, and the justice she deserved, a conclusion that would shake the household and leave a lasting impact on every onlooker who had underestimated her. Stay tuned for the final chapter, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to witness how Aaliyah Moore's courage finally transforms the lives of everyone in that household. Aaliyah Moore stood in the grand hall, her posture calm yet resolute. As the final confrontation unfolded, the room charged with a tension so thick it seemed to press against the walls, and every eye in the house, from the loyal staff to the curious guests, was fixed on her, some still skeptical, some quietly rooting for the truth to triumph, while Ethan Hayes carefully guided the sequence of revelations, presenting evidence, eyewitness accounts, and the corroboration of Emily, showing step by step that Aaliyah's actions had been nothing but honest and meticulous, and that every accusation Victoria Hayes had hurled was built on bias, fear, and assumptions about race and status, a prejudice that had blinded her to reality for far too long. And the air crackled as Victoria's carefully constructed image of control began to crumble, her elegant composure faltering under the undeniable weight of truth, and even Jonathan Hayes, proud and imposing, could no longer mask the flicker of doubt in his eyes as he watched his wife's arrogance collide with reality. Ethan's calm but firm voice carried across the hall, explaining how the jewelry had never left the safe, how every staff member could verify Aaliyah's diligence, and how the so-called inconsistencies Victoria insisted upon were fabrications of impatience, bias, and entitlement. And as the facts became irrefutable, murmurs spread among the guests, some astonished by their own assumptions, some silently shamed, all forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that prejudice had dictated their judgments, that they had allowed color and status to cloud perception, and that Aaliyah Moore, the woman they had underestimated for years, possessed not only integrity, but courage and dignity beyond measure. Aaliyah's eyes met Ethan's briefly, a shared understanding passing between them, a gratitude for fairness and a silent acknowledgement that her years of silent struggle, the humiliation, the underestimation, and the quiet endurance, had led to this moment of vindication, and she felt a surge of pride, tempered by humility, as she realized that justice was not simply about proving innocence, but about exposing the layers of bias that had long governed behavior, shaping perceptions and silencing the worthy. Jonathan, finally moving from his armchair, approached Aaliyah with an unexpected sincerity, extending a hand and offering an apology for the pain caused, acknowledging that wealth and power could never excuse disregard for humanity, while Victoria, visibly shaken, remained silent, forced to watch her son Ethan demonstrate fairness, courage, and moral clarity far beyond his years, and the room collectively absorbed the lesson, understanding that true character could not be measured by status, race, or privilege, but by honesty, compassion, and integrity. As the tension broke, Emily stepped forward to commend Aaliyah, guests whispered apologies, and the household staff began to see the world differently, realizing that underestimation and bias had masked brilliance, strength, and virtue for far too long, and that acknowledging these truths was essential to justice, equality, and dignity. Aaliyah, composed yet triumphant, spoke quietly but with conviction, reminding everyone that respect is earned by character, not dictated by wealth, skin color, or fear, and her words resonated through the hall, leaving a lasting impact that transformed the household, inspired reflection, and redefined the perception of what it meant to be courageous, fair, and honorable. The room finally exhaled collectively, the heavy weight of prejudice lifted, the guests humbled, the staff enlightened, and Aaliyah Moore celebrated not only for her innocence, but for her enduring strength, compassion, and unwavering dignity, while Ethan Hayes stood proudly beside her, a beacon of justice and fairness in a world too often clouded by bias, leaving an unforgettable lesson: courage, integrity, and truth always prevail. Comment your thoughts below, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and let the journey of justice and resilience inspire you.